Welcome to Strictly Speaking, which is our conversations with theater makers. My name is Jayme Mellema, and I am the resident scenic designer for University Theater. We're so happy that you're joining us for this series tonight. I want to say thank you to all who have tuned in so far and for your support for arts of NC State and of University Theater. Our guest tonight is production and stage manager Joel Veenstra. Joel, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Let's get into it. It's good to see you. We were just talking prior that we haven't seen each other. Well, I mean, compared to some of our guests, I've seen you relatively recently, like 5 years ago.
Right.
Some folks has been like 20. So that was a great opportunity to see you at the USITT.
Yeah, and it's a wild world too with the social media and stuff, because you kind of feel this weird sort of connection, kind of see how people's lives develop, but then you don't really actually talk to each other until you like have an event like this. So
yes, I know, it's weird. We know each other from college, so it's been since the 90s, I imagine. Otherwise, so how are you doing? Like, how are things going at your university? Got much going on?
Yeah, we're chugging along. I mean, I think it's really interesting, right? Because when this whole global pause happened, we had to figure out like, what are we going to do? And some institutions said we're going to just stop doing productions for a while. Some we had a lot of cancellations immediately, and then we had to figure out how do we still provide content and education to our students, even if we can't be together in space. And that's especially hard because within theater, it's all about being together in space, right? Yeah. Like it's really tricky. But we've been trying to be very innovative and try to kind of push boundaries of how to bridge gaps through technology and try to create theater in a non-theatrical space. It's been good and challenging, and I think we're learning a lot that I think will serve us well after the pandemic.
That's good. I mean, this, for example, is one of the ways that we're doing that. Trying to stay connected with our students and our patrons by and providing some education and also entertainment. So yeah, that's great. Have you been any like Zoom shows or anything like that?
Yeah, so we've done it's kind of fallen into three different areas. So we've had some Zoom shows and some augmented live productions, right? So where we're using either Zoom or some other platform to or kind of intermediaries to kind of produce the show. So there's things like OBS, which is a software that can do some different graphic editing and things that can happen live, but then kind of processes them through, and then it comes out to either Zoom or to another platform that then can have a little bit of audience interaction. So we've been exploring that. We've also been doing some recorded productions, which fall a little bit more in the realm of essentially like filmmaking, right? But we're not a filmmaking school, so it's a little bit kind of trying to bridge that gap. And so we're trying to lean into rather than trying to be a film school, trying to make theatrical productions online. And there's some interesting explorations of what that is, including there's a theater out here called the Geffen Playhouse that's doing some really interesting kind of interactive things that are filmed but feel very theatrical. Also, La Jolla Playhouse is doing some interesting things down south of here, and a number of other institutions and artists are doing some really interesting film things that feel much more like theatrical things than online. And then we're also doing some radio plays or some recorded things where it's more about the audio and oral experience. So
yeah, that's great. Do you think, like, because of where you're located, some of that film access, knowledge, any of that has had any kind of influence on that?
Yeah, totally. It's definitely with collaborators and with some of our experience. I know that I have a film background, and that definitely helps within the process. It also it's kind of like this non-binary framework as well of like, it's helpful, but it's also hurtful, right? Because when you see a film, you have a certain expectation of what you're going to see and kind of what those production values are, versus you go to theater and it's a different kind of value system, or kind of what are the agreed upon aesthetics that we are going to experience. And to do the production value that you want costs a lot of money. It's a small budget feature film is $12 million, and like a high level theatrical production, like highest levels like $12 million, right? Or
Yeah.
so it's kind of different ends of the spectrum that can then work for or against you.
Yeah, that's a good point. I had not thought about that yet. So I guess specifically, how has or how do you feel like things have changed stage management? I mean, it seems
Well,
both the same and wildly different.
yeah, yes, because so it's similar in terms of the communication, right? So stage managers are central, kind of the central kind of hub of communication between everyone. And so that continues, and it's almost more challenging because when we have times to interact in multiple ways, like running into somebody in the hallway or calling them or emailing them, or again, kind of actually being in a space together, there's multiple ways to communicate. And in this virtual space, when you completely eliminate the in-person interaction, you're really relying on kind of these digital or kind of artificial interfaces, and even phone calls or Zoom calls. There's this kind of, I mean, if you call somebody, they're not picking up, it's problematic, right? Versus if you're going to see them at their office or at rehearsal.
Right.
So it's a little bit more challenging within that framework. You also have elements in terms of making sure everybody's in the loop. And actually, with some of our digital tools, it actually serves us better because we're doing some really interesting things with digital prompt books within Google Drive and within some of these tools to kind of consolidate information that then can be distributed to everybody in the same way. So we're doing some really kind of interesting, innovative growth areas there.
Exciting.
Yeah, a lot of project coordination. So in terms of deadlines and getting people together in terms of that, so that's similar. Unless we are doing a live show, which we've done a few of them, which either like a Zoom show or again, kind of one of those augmented shows that have more technology, which takes a lot more to set up. The calling aspect, where we call cues for a show and different things to be triggered within in a show, is really tricky on this platform. So it's there's a few things you can trigger. You can trigger some video things. You can cue people to come on stage on the screen. You can cue certain, remind people in terms of costume changes or some of the logistical changes. But unless you're kind of moving towards the upper end of technology, you're not going to necessarily be able to trigger light cues. You can trigger some sound cues, make them happen, but it's just not quite the same.
Yeah.
We did an interesting collaboration with ClearCom, which is a headset system that people communicate with, that we can do some remote talking to one another. That's works even better than calling on the phone or talking over Zoom. And so that's kind of an interesting tool, but there's a pretty interesting, there's a price tag to that, right? So anytime you do technology, there's always price tags to kind of what it is, which then kind of delves into accessibility and kind of what
right,
how does that work? So it's tricky.
Well, yeah. So I guess before I get too much further, like, can you define what a stage manager is and what that role means for you?
Yeah, totally. So for me, the stage manager, I think of almost as a production as a human body, right? Like, and the stage manager is a little bit like the spine that kind of holds everyone together and keeps all the communication running up and down amongst the entire team and make sure everyone has what they need. It's also, we also have the task to both keep people safe and facilitate the best possible experience for those who are participating with the project. So we help kind of manage the environment that people work in and try to make sure that everyone has what they need to best do their best work. And so we set the tone. We try to keep communication with everybody. We try to check in with everybody. If it's a union production or equity production, we may kind of make sure that we follow those guidelines in terms of how to help support people do their best work based on those agreed upon elements. But it's all about kind of setting the tone and then making sure we have what we need. And then when we get into tech, it's making sure that we have all the different technical elements working together well. Everyone has the time they need to actually get the production elements together. And then we are helping to run the show, queuing the show, the various different elements that are going on, depending on the production. Sometimes we're queuing actors on, mostly that happens in opera. But different types of productions work slightly differently, but the stage manager is essentially just making sure that the show runs well, everyone has what they need, they do it safely, and it consistently is produced as close as possible within a live experience so that every audience has a similar experience of that production.
Yeah, that's a lot. Stage managers do a lot.
Yeah, we do. I have students that literally comment, wow, we do a lot when we actually kind of review all the different elements in terms of setting the
Yeah.
tone and all. So it takes a special person or someone that has a unique desire to take on challenges to do this role.
So how did you first get involved in theater, and like more specifically, what led you to stage management or management in general?
Uh, my mom actually got me into theater when I was very young in early elementary, and I played Ragtime Cowboy Joe in the Little Rascal Follies. I had a huge foam hat, and I walked down on stage. I felt like I was so cool, little tiny boy on stage, and I loved it. And
That's
then,
amazing.
yeah, and then in yeah, elementary, I was playing another Herb the Verb, and one of our school things. And then my first actual kind of like real production was in middle school, where I played actually a stage manager. And so it was kind of a funny murder mystery thing that then I played a stage manager. I actually didn't really know what that was because we didn't have it really in high school. And then when we got to college, Calvin College, then we actually had stage managers in kind of the formal setting. And I got to know a little about there, but I wasn't quite sure that's what was for me. Obviously, within the Calvin Theater Company, we did a wide variety of different roles so that we could kind of
quite a few.
You learn about those different options and opportunities. But ultimately, we didn't have a theater major there. We just had the communication arts and sciences. So rather than getting a minor, I just kind of overdosed on as many communication classes as I could. So I, looked at film and television, theater, and just kind of explored all these things, and was just really interested in entertainment specifically.
Mm-hmm.
And then out of Calvin, I was a participant in the Calvin had a couple kind of improvisational groups, and I started a group there called SWAT, and joined River City Improv, which was kind of an alumni performance group outside of there, and then also worked at our local television station, WZZM 13 in Grand Rapids, and essentially just like within school, I had all these levels of interest. And so I kind of went out of school and said, how can I work in these areas? And so I kind of, through many different jobs, I cobbled together various revenue streams to make this job, which then I eventually made as a company that was an umbrella company that was literally doing some performing and some, production stuff, some stage management stuff, some directing stuff. And essentially filling my passion, but kind of really being a generalist across the spectrum. Wow. And I did some stuff in kind of the film world and was really interested in that. And I built this business over a number of years that, I think I worked on several hundred productions over several years. And wow. I was at a point where I was like, I can continue on this path and make this my lifelong career. It's that I've got this company that does work in Western Michigan and kind of this region. Or I can throw it all up in the air and see what happens and move to LA and just, try to see what happens in the mainstream film industry, because it's not going to have that in Michigan.
Right.
And so I moved out to LA. I left the folks behind and was very blessed to get in with a production company called Alcon Entertainment. They've done films like My Dog Skip and Insomnia. Most recently, like P.S. I Love You, The Blind Side. That's still not most recently. It's amazing how time flies. But they did a number of big productions with an output deal through Warner Brothers. And so I worked there for a number of years. I really enjoyed it, but I didn't, I just missed theater. I missed the nature of how people collaborate within theater. And so I went back and got my MFA actually through University of California, Irvine. And then, and I specifically looked for stage management here because basically what I was doing in LA was I looked at my skill set and I said, where can I fit best in terms of the skills that I have? And my skills with organizing and problem solving and trying to just kind of help facilitate processes was really what drove me and what excited me. And so that kind of aligned most with stage management. And so that's what I went for. And after that, upon working my way out of school, I got my equity card, worked on a number of different equity shows in LA, and then was hired to be a production manager for a little while with Cornerstone Theater Company, and then got hired back here to teach at UCI. And so that's where I'm at now. And I teach, and then I also stage manage and do a couple other productions and various things on the side.
That's crazy. That's a lot of stuff.
Yeah, it's been a wild ride. It's pretty incredible, and it's good. Again, it's kind of amazing as I look back at kind of all the things that I've been able to do.
Right. So there was no real like conscious effort, like I'm gonna do film now versus theater. It just is sort of like wherever it took you, it took you.
Yeah, my kind of mantra in terms of how I've approached life is I just look for the open doors. Like when there's an
Yeah.
open door, I go for that because it just seems like that's the open door, right?
Mhm.
And you know, it seemed like at the time when I was shifting from Michigan to LA, it just seemed like this was the right times. I could kind of shore up some projects, and I could either try to initiate more, or I could kind of make a leap out of it and transition out. And that seemed like the time, and then I did, and then these opportunities opened up. And whenever I saw kind of an open opportunity, I just went for it because it felt like that's kind of where the future was leading me. So
Yeah, that's great. So you mentioned you were at, I will just touch on this briefly at Alcon. So what were you doing there exactly for them?
So at Alcon, I was. Interesting thing is, part of the process of moving to LA is actually I went to a training organization called Act One. They have a program that helps train people specifically from a faith perspective
Uh-huh.
for the film industry. And I went there initially for a writing program, like a month-long intensive out in LA. And that was good and interesting. And I thought maybe writing's my thing. And then after a while, I was like, nah, writing's not my thing. It's amazing. You try things, things open up, you
Yeah.
try it, it works for you or it doesn't work for you. And then you try something else. Um, and so I went out there for that. And then when I moved out permanently, they had a producing program that I went and took a part of at Act One. And part of producing and production within film is there's a lot of different avenues and approaches to it. And one of those areas, which is kind of most coveted by a lot of people, is development. And
Mhm.
development within the nonprofit world is often people that are fundraising. So they're trying to
Right.
get money for organizations. Within film world, it's the people that are developing the projects that are actually the scripts and the stories and the narratives. And so that's kind of that realm. And
Yeah.
so I was in the development office of Alcon Entertainment. I was the assistant to the senior VP of development. And so I was able to get a lot of scripts and give notes on them. I managed a team of readers because we had, probably 1,000 different submissions a year of film projects that people wanted, maybe more, that people wanted us to consider making into movies. And so I would help negotiate all those and review all those and make suggestions on, should we do them, should they not? What would be teams that would potentially work together on them? But just to get into that, I actually would not have had that job if somebody from this organization didn't call them and put in a good word for me, and they respected this person. And so
Right.
I find like so much of the entertainment field is people that you know and how they can help support you or open doors for you.
Mhm.
And interesting enough, again, after I got in this program, this was a free internship that I started at that eventually turned into a job to get me into that position. And I
Mhm.
actually saw the people that applied for this job, and there was like over 80 applicants for this job from Harvard and Yale and all these other like fairly
Wow.
large institutions. And it literally, I think the thing that made it or broke it for me was that somebody was willing to make a call and kind of recommend me for this job. And so it
Right.
was awesome. It was incredible to see how films were made and totally eye-opening in terms of that process. And I loved it when I was there. I enjoyed the money, I enjoyed the people, I enjoyed the
Yeah.
experience. But again, it didn't totally fit my skill set, and it didn't totally
Yeah.
fit kind of how I was passionate to work in the world. So
Yeah.
I went back to theater.
That's super interesting. You've done like a lot of different kinds of productions too as a stage manager or a production manager. Has it all been about like those open doors, or have you been more intentional about the projects you've been choosing as you've gone on in the years?
Initially it was all about the open doors. As
Sure.
time went on, I tried to be a little bit more selective and a little more strategic in terms of
Yeah.
where I wanted to go and what I wanted to work on. Uh, and that's, I mean, I still would go for open doors, but then it's a question of is this something I'm passionate about, or doesn't align with kind of what I want to do or where I want to go. But I would strategically say that, I like to go, the things that really most interest me now is working with people that I enjoy working with.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know that there's productions that are challenging. I mean, every production is challenging in its own way in terms of organizing it and putting it together. But it's you want to go on those challenges with people that you enjoy working with, and so that's kind of a key factor for me, more so even though than the types of productions I'm working on. It's the collaborators, the people that I work with that are really inspiring to me.
Yeah, that's so true. I definitely feel that. Like doing management like that causes me major anxiety just thinking about it. But like, do you ever? This is a question I'm sure students might ask, but like, do you ever feel like overwhelmed, or have you like how do you talk yourself out of those moments, or what? How do you help keep yourself from feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. Well, I think part of it is helpful in that, kind of something you alluded to there, is like each one of us have different skill sets, right? Like if we all had the same skill set, then we'd all just kind of be, the same. And one of the beauties about the world is like there's such diversity in so many different types of people. And that's how I think collaborative teams come together to really help and support one another. And so I think, certainly the things, that might stress you out, or other people that I work with might stress out, like they excite me in some ways, like how are we gonna figure this challenge out, how are we gonna do this thing. So part of it is kind of my disposition in terms of how, just putting together challenging things or kind of facing challenges are invigorating for me. And the lens in which I see the world, right? So like my partner is will see the world a certain way and kind of see things that I won't see, and then I'll see some things that they won't see, and so we kind of delegate in terms of our family, or organizing kind of trips or kind of different events, things. For example, they are excellent with names. I am horrible with names. I had us have name tags at our wedding so that we could compensate for my poor name remembering.
That's such a great idea.
Yeah. So, but then I could organize all the logistics of the wedding really well, more so than them, because I just have a kind of thought process for that. But then, there are times still when we're like stressed or pressed, or when things are coming together and it's kind of like a pinch point. And for me, it's been really helpful, breathing exercise, taking breath, meditative processes and thinking about that, kind of focusing in on core principles or mantras in terms of, a great one is, no matter what happens, the people that love me will still love me.
That's right.
Yeah. So ultimately at the end of the day, depending on your production, nobody's going to die. Yeah.
Right.
So,
well, hopefully not.
yeah. Depending on your production, some productions, but I think it's just kind of remembering who you are and kind of taking space when you need space. Because I think one of the really cool things that are coming out of this pandemic is people are becoming more and more aware of their humanity and their limits and what they can and cannot do. And so I think that'll be an outcome, I think, coming hopefully moving forward, that we remember and are aware, and people can be human, even the challenges of.
Yeah, I think so. It feels like that everybody is, like you said, realizing what their limits are, and that those are maybe lower than they imagined previously. And as we move out of this, I know I personally am feeling much more protective of that, like those limits, and feeling like that's too much. I can't do that. Or I can do that because it's, XYZ. But yeah, hopefully it may not last forever, but hopefully if people are able to set their boundaries early now, then maybe we'll be able to hang on to it for a while.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's easy in theater in particular to like, make it like your whole life, and you're doing it constantly, and that's how people burn out.
Yeah, totally.
It's not good for you.
Yeah. Well, we have this weird sort of thing of like, this is oftentimes it feels like our family, or feels like our friends, and we want to spend kind of time with people that we really appreciate. And then there's this kind of deadline that we're moving towards, and so we're like, oh, we got to do anything for this deadline. And I think, again, hopefully as we're reflecting on how we do things, that we can reframe this and think, well, do we really need to do this? Is this really better for the long term? So, we'll see how it all sticks, but there's some interesting kind of ground swelling energy behind things like canceling 10 out of 12s and being more inclusive and a lot of other kind of key factors, and no more non-paid internships. We'll see how it all plays out, but I know
it's been exciting.
Yeah.
And exhausting.
Totally, right? Like we're all already dealing with this pandemic, and then we got all these other things. It's like,
so we've got this pandemic going on. So why don't we go ahead and just like reevaluate all of our theatrical practices while we're
right. Well, I think it's the nature of the theater culture. We're just gluttons for punishments. We work 12 out of 12s. We do all this stuff. It's just like, let's just layer it all on.
More.
The production company I worked at, the film production company, Alcon, the HR guy said, I love hiring theater people because they really know how to work. They really know how to like really be all invested in the process. And I think it's so true. You do theater because you love it and you kind of have kind of sense, but I think we got to be mindful too of kind of, again, our limitations and kind of how do we take care of oneself.
Yeah, it's really easy to jump in with both feet instead of really going, maybe I should like sit on the edge and dip my toe in first. So that sort of brings me to like, well, there's no good segue for some of these questions.
Great, that's fine.
So, theater versus film. Do you have like a favorite kind of, or events or versus shows? Like, do you have favorite kinds of projects to work on as a manager, or maybe what are the favorite parts of either?
Yeah, at this point where I'm at, I really like, I've been really liking multi-system things like conferences or symposiums that have more than one kind of thing, because I just think it kind of it's this nice challenge of Tetris in terms of both fundraising and kind of scheduling and all these things. So it's kind of an upper level. I love being an equity stage manager. I love working on those shows. Since I've been teaching, I've been primarily doing kind of really short one-offs or stage reading or workshop type of things, because within equity, they usually want a longer contract, and in some of those theaters, they're usually wanting a longer stay. And my window of time when I'm teaching is, like 3 months. And so to fit something in within that time is a little bit tricky. So then, I can do these one-off shows, or I've been doing a lot of kind of events, so fundraisers where they're trying to do, have celebrities come in and we interact with them and engage that and run that show. And so those are pretty easy one-offs. But then I've been also kind of in this kind of zone of producing conferences that are like multi-day, multi-event things that then have performances in it, that then we have to negotiate that, but then how it interfaces with all these other elements and negotiating teams to make sure that every area is covered. And I just enjoy the kind of unique challenge of kind of those multiple systems and how they work and how everything works together. Then also the audience experience in terms of how they engage with this. Because when you have several hundred people coming in to a space, you have to think about the orientation of their kind of pre-show experience coming into an experience, and then how they negotiate from different venue to venue and that kind of flow. So it's a little bit more complex, but it's something that I really enjoy in terms of the nuance of that. And then, I also appreciate then when I go to conferences or go to events like this, analyzing like what is working for them, what isn't.
Right.
So it's kind of an interesting kind of interplay of, constant learning and challenges in terms of how to kind of refine the system to make it as engaging and user-friendly as possible.
Yeah. So my understanding is that you still have stayed involved with the field of improv. Is that true? Yeah.
Yeah.
How is that? Like, is that something you put away for a while and have now picked back up, or were you able to sort of maintain that over the years, or?
So I started in it essentially at, when I was in Calvin.
Yeah.
Went to River City, performed with them for, 5-6 years. And then when I moved out to LA, I started this film stuff, and not to be disparaging, but like the film industry is an industry where they make decisions specifically on the money that's going to be spent and the money that's going to be returned to them. And they have literally algorithms to figure out whether or not they're going to greenlight a film based on how much it's going to bring back in terms of potential return. And so it was a little disheartening in terms of my artistic self. So I actually got involved with the Second City out here in Hollywood.
Nice.
And played with them for a while. So, my day job, as it were, I was very blessed to be in the entertainment career and working in the film industry. And then at nights and weekends, I would go play and do improvisation. And so that was spectacular for me. And then when I got into grad school, I still did a little bit here and there. And I started an improv team in grad school so I could continue to play in parallel, again, with the work that I was doing. If you can get a day job in the arts and then also do a night job in the arts, that's like, I don't know, I think that's the peak perfection to some respects. But actually then after school, it was a little bit trickier to kind of be involved because of kind of working kind of both the different jobs one after another. And then when I was a production manager, it just was a heavy load to be able to negotiate that. So in that time I did much less. And then when I got back here, I was able to now mentor one of the improv teams that I helped start here, which is awesome. And then continue to help them grow, and then do a little bit of performance here and there. And then I actually ran into an organization called the Applied Improvisation Network. And these are folks that utilize the improvisational kind of ideas and concepts and then applied them to other fields. So improvisation is a lot about communication and how we interact with each other and how we listen to each other. So folks were using that to apply it to business, to psychology, to healthcare, to audience engagement, just a number of different customer interactions, like a lot of different applications that were not theatrical at all. And that's what this organization did. And they have like thousands of practitioners all over the world that are doing this work. And they've had an annual conference every year until this pandemic, that then they've gotten together and had folks kind of share their knowledge and what they're doing. And I was inspired by that as well, and hadn't seen the same level of kind of organizational groundwork for the theatrical improvisational world, right? So they're all doing applied improvisation, but theatrical improvisation has been very much kind of an artisan craftsman like mentorship model where we're just passing along the knowledge one to the next. And there's kind of not been a high level kind of evaluative kind of academic rigor to exploring like what is the nature of this work, what kind of works well and what doesn't work well. So with a collaborator from Chapman University at the time, started this thing called the Global Improvisation Initiative, that we tried to get a bunch of practitioners of people that do theatrical improvisation, some applied improvisers as well, but looked at kind of trying to document and denote the historical roots as well as kind of where we're evolving the art form. So trying to kind of do some documentation and some high level evaluation. I mean, it's a great art form. It's a lot of fun, but like it's not there's a lack of respect to some respects in terms of what it is. And so trying to kind of bring some of that respectability to it is kind of what we've been trying to do. And we've done we're going to be doing our third symposium coming up this June. We did one here in Southern California, we did one in London, and then we're doing one globally online, so this June. So
that's exciting.
Yeah,
that's very fun.
So yes, I have been doing it a lot.
Quite a bit.
Yeah. And I think it's the basis of all we do, right? Like we're improvising right now, right? Like
I was gonna say that earlier. I was like, or you're doing things like this, which is essentially, live improving. I mean, we're not making up scenes, but we're running with it.
Every day. This whole pandemic's been a massive improvisation, right? Our whole society has been like, good luck.
I hope you
figure it out.
Exactly. Well, like something in there that you were talking about really highlights the idea, like this idea that it seems like you've started a lot of projects from the ground up. And maybe not a lot, maybe that's an exaggeration, but like a fair number of projects from the ground up. Like, do you consider yourself a self-starter, or is this like, are you seeing the need and just filling it, or
Yes.
yeah, I don't know if
Yeah.
it's in there.
Yeah, I would say I would say I'm a self-starter. I say fill needs. I like to help facilitate people. So people sometimes bring projects to me that then often that then I help kind of make happen.
Oh, yeah.
I think part of it comes from an innate sense that I would audition when I was younger and I wouldn't get into things. And so I'd be like, fine, I'm just gonna do my own thing. Right. Like,
Yeah.
that's it's kind of a growing mantra of folks within the arts that like, you want to do something, people aren't giving you the opportunities, you have the capacity, why not do it yourself?
Yeah.
And so I think that serves you well, because sometimes there'll be opportunities and sometimes they won't. And in terms of the film world, somebody once referred to it as casting roulette, because they would go into these casting rooms and they would be sitting around a whole group of people that looked exactly like them, and all these headshots of the people that looked exactly the same, and it's just like, who's going to get picked today? Versus if you can do your own thing, or you can kind of create your own opportunities, you can't be shut down from that.
Yeah, there's a couple of really interesting angles in there. Like, one is that, like, how it's so much easier now than it ever has been to make your own things. Like, I mean, gatekeeping is still a thing we talk about in the industry, all the industries, but like, that feels like it's breaking down more and more every day as more and more people are able to make their own work. It just didn't used to be that way, right? Like there really were these barriers you had to get through, and that's so different. And there was another point, I lost it. Oh well, it'll come back to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely less gatekeeping, but now there's so much more content, right? So like, it's again, everything's a both, right? Everything's on the spectrum of, it's like not black or white, of like, this is perfect now, right? Because like, suddenly you have a million YouTube channels that you can try to find content on, and it's like, how to stand out from that,
right? How do you find the content? And
and also, like, coming out of Calvin, I was like, I'm gonna do a film, it's gonna be great. I put out all these flyers around Calvin. I thought, man, everyone's gonna come to this audition, they're gonna come and show up. One person showed up. So it's not just about doing your own work. I think it's also about being aware of your community, right? So again, like, trying to reach out and kind of, and I think that's how you stand out as well, is like, who's your collective of people that are willing to show up for you, or willing to support you, or kind of got your back. And yeah,
that's definitely one of the things that was what I was gonna say earlier. It's like a theme that has definitely come up in a lot of these interviews, whether it's people doing exactly as you're saying, or just like when we ask, like, what are your favorite things to do? And it often comes down to making your own stuff. Like, people seem most excited and get engaged and love doing their own things and their own work. And then often we have folks like yourself who is like, well, I'm just gonna make the work.
totally.
And that's been really a really interesting thing that a lot of folks have said on here, that comes down to
and again, we're at this very unique time, both in terms of ability to get your stuff out there, but also in terms of access to information, right? Like, this series is spectacular.
Yeah.
And like, when I was growing up, or when we were growing up, like, to connect with the people that you have on this, or and so many of the people that are like 1 degree of separation, or like one Twitter tweet to try to connect to, or an email, like, it's unbelievable. And this information of how folks are doing this work, or how they're engaging in the world, so kind of accessible to you, or to your students, or to anyone, is really then kind of advances you towards your goals, right? Because you suddenly have more information than you'd ever have before, in terms of how to do what you want to do.
Yeah, and like you're saying, that the challenge now is just finding it, because sifting through it all.
Yeah, and so much only so much time in a day, and so much energy in a day, right? Like,
right. I have a few of these kind of these standard questions that are like, what is your favorite part of your job?
Yeah. Um, uh,
I know all of it.
right. No, it is good. I I mean, I'm gonna be blunt. This day and age, like time when I can just focus on doing what I need to do and work like for a little bit of time is really that's spectacular right now. I usually have,
Yes.
I'm amazed my kids are not interrupting in here. I'm not in my office, even though it looks like I'm in my office. This is all
Right.
virtual. But we'll be it'll be amazing if my kids don't come in on this talk. But having time where I'm not not interrupted by various things is very satisfying. When
Yes.
when a complex production closes, when a very complex queue system hits perfectly, like those satisfying
Yeah.
things of when like there's a synergy of things and it completes. Oh man, it's a rush. An
Yeah,
improv
that's good
scene when
stuff.
when you have a button, like I mean these moments when the synchronization of time and space in this experience hits,
Yeah.
that's spectacular.
And it's like one of those things that you like everybody you're trying to manufacture, like this
Yeah.
crazy like experience. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it happens when you're not expecting it and it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a very improvisational moment, right? Like uh,
Totally.
and all of theater is about like replicating, right? We're trying to replicate
Yeah.
those that magic.
Yeah.
And then it's really hard because we're even in this virtual space, we're even more artificial because we have these kind of intermediaries between us and our audience
Yeah.
or us and the other.
Barriers. Mhm.
Yeah, so it's tricky. It gets tricky, but it's possible.
Mhm. I have similar like some of my favorite moments similarly are those moments of synergy that happen sort of like in tech or in rehearsal where you like this person or even in a meeting, right? Where like this person is that idea, oh, but this idea, and then and then it all just sort of is like, yes, this is the thing now, and it's really cool, and that's always exciting moment.
You just feel a rush, right? Like you feel like,
Yeah,
yes, this is it.
yeah,
So yeah, I love that. That's probably the best thing
yeah.
from.
Have you had like a favorite or most exciting project that you've worked on to date? That I know they're all
I think,
but
I mean, our symposium that we did in London was pretty
mm,
spectacular because it just had a lot of collaborators on it, and it just came together pretty remarkably. Um, so that was pretty spectacular. I mean, the films that I worked on, I have a few credits on films, which is fun.
mhm,
The process though is so kind of broken down, right? Like, so we had one part of one process and we don't really see the hundreds of other people that work on this thing. But then when we come together for the premiere, that's pretty spectacular.
yeah,
But it's, but I don't know. I don't know. I like I can't name one project per se because, but they're just great in terms of how they kind of come together and kind of how they
yeah.
continue.
There are
Uh,
moments in like every experience that can be good and or bad.
yeah, yeah, totally,
The pluses and the minuses.
totally.
Um, have you ever so was there a class or maybe even not a class but an experience like a non-theater class or non-related class or like I said experience that you've had or a class taken that has proven really invaluable to what you're doing?
Hmm.
That's a hard question.
It is a hard question. Yeah, because I took so many. I mean, I guess I've taken so many communication classes, right? So like
Yeah.
my television production that I took with Corf and
Oh,
those things laid the groundwork for my video work that I did in my business and then into my film work. They were where like I
yeah.
wouldn't have been down that path without those elements. And then now, as we're doing this remote production, a lot of my video knowledge and film production knowledge is really playing into how we do this. So I'm consulting
Hmm,
on like every single production that we're doing right now in
right.
some really interesting ways that like none of my other colleagues have because they've been so in
Mm,
this theater world. So that's kind of that's kind of a key thing, but that's kind of a cheat answer. In terms of other areas, I mean, psychology is a great class in terms of how, because stage management is all about kind of personal interaction. How do you motivate and kind of engage with different people? And so that's kind of been a helpful class. That's in terms of, because stage management, like improvisation, all these things, it's all about kind of interactions and kind of how we engage with one another. And so psychology is kind of how we think and how we work with each other. So that's been helpful. I took a history of kind of gender studies at Calvin that sounds really interesting, but apparently I was not at all interested because I had a horrible grade. And so in terms of what that was. And so at that time, I mean, it's more interesting to me now, but like at that time in my life, I think it was a highlight that if you're not interested in something, maybe you don't go after that thing, right? Like it's a lesson learned in the invert of like, you're not going to be successful at doing something that doesn't engage you or doesn't kind of motivate you. So yeah.
Funny. Huh. So I think we're getting close to the end here. Well, you had a video.
Yeah.
Connection to improv stuff. Yes. Yeah.
Let me share. This is the video of the Applied Improvisation Network. I actually chaired their symposium, their conference that they did in 2017 here. And so let's take a look. This is just a highlight reel of what we did at that particular conference.
Awesome.
It has been a one-of-a-kind conference, a one-of-a-kind experience. This group is my tribe. These are my people. This is what I stand for. And in here is the change we're going to see in the world. Through these people, it starts here.
So the skills the world needs now are improvisational skills. Skills of listening, collaborating, being more playful, having a go at things, adapting, and making better use of limited resources for sustainability. And you here, the AIN members, are probably the best teachers of these skills in the world. So we have a responsibility to do that well as pioneers. And as an organization, we're also pioneers. We're an improvisational organization. We consist of the interactions of our members. What we do is the organization.
It's been a wonderful time here. The conference was really awesome. I'm glad I came. I'm glad I made that decision to come, and it's been awesome.
So we're applied improvisers, and improvisation has rich and varied range of traditions and many possible applications, as we are discovering.
So we have the tradition of Keith Johnstone and the work that he's given us, and Viola Spolin, who is the mother and grandmother of us all, and Gary, I know, is dear to her as well.
We have Augusto Boal, who, like Johnston and Spolin, created many activities and games which we still use. And Boal also had a really significant political dimension. His background was politics and protest and standing up for people's rights. And that feeds into what we do now with our humanitarian and other parts of our work.
We also have Del Close, a very important person in our tradition.
Wonderful conference, wonderful people. It's the connections that matter to me the most. SoCal, it's UC Irvine, it's beautiful people. Love the connections.
We are doing it right now by being here. We don't have time. We don't have time. We don't have time to waste. We don't have time to waste anything. You know, those of us who are a little further along in years know that more deeply, and the world is forcing us to recognize that even further. So we want to do everything we can now to actually use our craft to make this world a better place.
That was incredible.
Oh my God.
We just-
we came, we planned, we did it.
Yes, what a great time. Thanks for coming. See you next year in Paris.
That's super interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting group. And, you know, we had, you know, several hundred people here at UCI on the 2017 to do this conference. And again, they're kind of doing some very interesting applications in the Applied Improvisation Network. It's a little different than the Global Improvisation Initiative because we're kind of more theatrical. So
Right.
rather than just talking about those applications, we do actually highlight and explore and elevate all those teachers that they reference. But it's amazing how many of those theatrical tools can be very much applied to our normal lives and how we engage with one another.
Yeah, that I just had not thought of it quite in that way. So that's super fascinating. So our last question that we ask everybody is what one piece of advice would you give students or others who are just starting out and who are interested in stage management?
Yeah, so
Or improv.
yeah, it's great. So if you're interested in stage management, I would say go for it. I mean, go for those open doors. I mean, you're probably a unique person if you're interested in stage management because you're interested in the organizational structures and how people engage and work with one another. And so it's kind of a unique thing. A lot of people are like, nope, don't want to do that. Don't want to help people organize their space. And we just want to be told kind of where to go and what they want to do. But if you are, you do have that inclination, there's certainly a need for folks to help organize and support each other. And if you have that inclination, sometimes we undervalue that, right? Like if you have a natural propensity towards organizing, kind of keeping things put together well and communicating with people, we sometimes think, well, everybody can do that, but they can't. We each have our own unique skills. And until we kind of run into other people or be aware of people that are different than us, then we start seeing the highlights of what makes us unique and special and kind of what can happen for us. In terms of improvisation, I think improvisation is spectacular and everyone should take an improvisational class if they can at some point. I think it's both life building and life giving and helps you build certain skill sets that will serve you well in any capacity, in any role. There's a phrase that I love from Keith Johnstone, and I'm gonna paraphrase it because I won't get it perfect, but it's this concept that whoever says yes is rewarded with the adventures they have, and whoever says no is rewarded with the security they have. And it's not a good or bad of like you have to say yes all the time, but if you say yes, you'll have an adventure and you'll have some opportunities. The door will open, you'll say yes, you'll go through it and have that adventure. If you say no, you're gonna have the security that you have within that framework, and that's not a bad thing. There's times and places when we need security and we need to protect ourselves and be mindful of how we're engaging the space. But I think it's a great lens that, again, I guess my big piece of advice is there's not a binary, it's a spectrum of opportunities, right? So kind of explore, it's not a yes, no, it's kind of what are the in-betweens that are kind of interesting and exciting for you to consider as you step forward in this unique and challenging world.
That's great. Thank you so much for being with us and doing this. It's been great to talk to you some more after so long.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem. And thank you people at large for coming and seeing. So once again, thank you for doing this. It's been great. And good luck with surviving until vaccines are all done.
Thank you. Thank you. You too. And congrats and great series. Congratulations.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everybody.
Take care.
Bye.